I was just 34 when my entire world shifted on its axis. My wife Sophia and I had been married for 6 years, living in what our friends called our dream home in suburban Seattle. We hosted dinner parties, took exotic vacations, and seemed to have it all figured out. But behind closed doors, our intimacy had been fading for months. Then came her suggestion that blindsided me completely. "What if we tried an open marriage?" she asked casually over dinner. "To spice things up." The words hit me like a physical blow, but I had no idea they were just the beginning of a painful journey. If you are watching this from a place where you have had to make difficult choices to protect your self-respect, drop a comment below and subscribe to join others who have found their strength in painful situations. I still remember the day I met Sophia like it was yesterday. It was at my college friend Tyler's summer barbecue 8 years ago. She walked in wearing a bright blue sundress, her dark hair cascading past her shoulders, and the most captivating smile that seemed to light up the entire backyard. I was talking to someone else at the time, but completely lost my train of thought when our eyes met across the patio. Tyler noticed and laughed. "Dude, you want me to introduce you?" Before I could answer, he was already waving her over. "Sophia, meet Enrique. He's the software guy I told you about." "Enrique, this is Sophia. She just started at my marketing firm." Our connection was immediate. We talked for hours that evening, long after other guests had left. Our first date was 3 days later, and we were practically inseparable from that point forward. Within 6 months, we were living together in my downtown apartment, and 2 years after meeting, we had a beautiful wedding at her parents' lakeside property, with 100 of our closest friends and family. I proposed at the Space Needle restaurant after hiking Mount Rainier that morning. It had been a perfect day, and when I dropped to one knee with the city lights surrounding us, her joyful tears told me everything I needed to know. The ring was a sapphire surrounded by tiny diamonds. Unconventional like her, she had once mentioned, not wanting a traditional diamond. The wedding was magical. Her father, fighting back tears, walked her down the aisle, as my brother stood beside me as best man. We wrote our own vows, promising forever in ways that felt unique and deeply personal. I promised to always be her safe harbor. She vowed to be my greatest adventure. Those words would later haunt me in ways I could never have imagined. Those first years of marriage were everything I had dreamed of and more. We built our careers side by side. My software development company was taking off, just as Sophia was climbing the ranks at her marketing firm. We saved aggressively and bought our dream home, a beautiful craftsman-style house with a view of the mountains 3 years into our marriage. We traveled whenever we could, exploring the cobblestone streets of Barcelona, the ancient temples of Kyoto, and the vibrant markets of Buenos Aires. Each trip brought us closer, or so I thought, creating shared memories and inside jokes that became the foundation of our relationship. We kept a map in our home office with pins marking every place we had visited together, always planning the next adventure. Our social circle was tight-knit and supportive. Monthly dinner parties rotating between our home and those of our 4 closest couple friends became a tradition. Game nights, weekend hikes, and holiday celebrations created a community around us that made life feel rich and full. Everyone saw us as the couple who had it all figured out. The ones who still held hands 6 years in, who looked at each other with genuine affection across crowded rooms. But looking back, I can pinpoint when things began to change. It was subtle at first, so subtle I dismissed the nagging worry as my own insecurity. Sophia started working longer hours when her company hired new leadership and restructured her team. She seemed energized by the challenge, talking animatedly about new projects and the innovative direction the company was taking. One name started appearing in her stories more frequently: James. He was the new creative director brought in from New York with impressive credentials and fresh ideas that aligned perfectly with Sophia's vision for her campaigns. Initially, I was happy for her, glad she had found a colleague who appreciated her talents and pushed her to grow professionally. But then came the late-night texts, the quick way she would flip her phone over when I entered a room, the work dinners that ran later and later, the declining intimacy between us. When I would reach for her at night, she was often too tired or not in the mood. Our passionate marriage had dwindled to occasional, almost perfunctory physical connection that left me feeling increasingly alone. I tried to reconnect, planning surprise date nights and weekend getaways, but something had shifted. She was physically present but emotionally elsewhere. When I tried to talk about it, she assured me everything was fine, that she was just stressed about work deadlines and I was overthinking things. I wanted to believe her. Then came the night that set everything in motion. We were at our favorite restaurant downtown, a rare Friday night when she had agreed to leave work at a reasonable hour. I had hoped it would be a chance to reconnect, to find our way back to each other without distractions. Instead, as we finished our main course, Sophia set down her fork and looked at me with an expression I could not quite read. "I have been thinking about something," she said, taking a sip of her wine. "What would you think about opening up our marriage?" I thought I had misheard her at first. Opening up. What do you mean? Seeing other people. Ethically. With rules and communication. Her tone was casual, as if suggesting we try a new restaurant rather than fundamentally altering the foundation of our relationship. I felt my stomach drop. "Are you not happy with me anymore?" "No, that is not it at all," she quickly assured me, reaching for my hand across the table. "I love what we have. But we are still young, Enrique. We got together in our 20s. Do you not ever wonder what else is out there? What experiences we might be missing? I think it could actually bring us closer, being able to explore and then come home to each other." I pulled my hand back, feeling suddenly cold, despite the warm restaurant. "I have never wanted anyone but you," I said quietly. "I do not need to explore to know that." The conversation continued at home, turning into our first real argument in years. I felt blindsided, inadequate, confused. Was I not enough? Had I missed signs that she was unhappy? She insisted it was not about dissatisfaction, but about growth and adventure, the very things she had once said she loved about me. Over the next few weeks, the topic would not die. Sophia brought it up repeatedly, sending me articles about successful open marriages, telling me about friends of friends who were happily exploring ethical non-monogamy. She insisted it was the modern way to approach long-term commitment in a world where people lived longer, more connected lives. "We can set whatever boundaries make you comfortable," she assured me. "We will always be primary to each other. This is just about adding to our lives, not taking away." After weeks of pressure, arguments that left me feeling increasingly isolated, and her subtle implication that I was being close-minded and insecure, I reluctantly agreed. Not because I wanted it, the thought made me physically ill, but because I feared losing her more. If this was what it took to save our marriage, maybe it was worth trying. Maybe she would try it and realize what we had was enough. It was the first of many compromises that would ultimately cost me my self-respect, though I couldn't see it yet. The night we set the ground rules for our open marriage remains etched in my memory as the beginning of the end. We sat at our kitchen table with legal pads like we were negotiating a business deal, rather than dismantling the exclusivity that had defined our relationship for 8 years. Complete honesty about all encounters, I insisted, writing it down as the first rule. Sophia nodded. "Of course. And veto power if either of us is uncomfortable with someone the other is seeing." We continued building our framework. Protection was non-negotiable. Regular testing was required. Our marriage would always come first. No mutual friends. No sleeping over elsewhere. No bringing others to our home. Weekly check-ins to discuss feelings. Either of us could close the marriage again if it wasn't working. On paper, it looked reasonable, ethical, considered. But the knot in my stomach told a different story. As we finished our list and Sophia smiled at me with what seemed like genuine appreciation, I felt like I'd signed away something precious without fully understanding its value. "Thank you for being open to this," she said, kissing me before heading to the bedroom with her laptop. "I think this is going to be good for us." I stayed at the table staring at our rule sheet and wondering how enforcing boundaries with outside people had become necessary in a marriage I thought was built on the premise of keeping others out. Sophia wasted no time. That same night, while I tried to sleep, she was creating dating profiles. I could hear her soft laughter from the living room, presumably responding to messages that were already coming in. By morning, she had 3 conversations going and a date scheduled for the following evening. That was fast, I said over coffee, trying to keep my tone neutral, despite the anxiety churning inside me. She shrugged, looking genuinely excited. "The apps are pretty efficient these days. Are you going to set up profiles too?" "I will." Eventually, the truth was, I had no desire to pursue other women. This had never been my idea or my need. But I knew that if I didn't at least make a show of participating, it would reveal that I'd only agreed to save our marriage, not because I wanted this lifestyle. Sophia's first date was with a graphic designer named Adrian. She spent 2 hours getting ready, trying on different outfits, and asking my opinion as if we were back in our early dating days. The familiar domesticity of the scene juxtaposed against its purpose created a cognitive dissonance that left me nauseous. "How do I look?" she asked, twirling in a dress I'd given her for her birthday the previous year. "Beautiful," I answered, honestly hating that another man would appreciate the sight tonight. "Have fun." After she left, I poured myself 2 fingers of whiskey and tried to distract myself with work. Failed. Tried a movie. Failed again. Ended up sitting in our darkened living room, checking my phone every few minutes, wondering what they were doing, if they were touching, if she was laughing at his jokes the way she used to laugh at mine. She came home around midnight, cheeks flushed, looking lighter than I'd seen her in months. She told me about the restaurant, his interesting travel stories, how they'd ended the night with just a kiss. I nodded and asked appropriate questions, playing my part in this new script, while a voice screamed inside my head. That night set the pattern for the weeks that followed. Sophia went on dates 2 or 3 times a week while I reluctantly created a profile and went on exactly one date with a woman named Daniela, who taught kindergarten and loved hiking. She was objectively lovely, but the entire evening felt wrong. I couldn't stop thinking about my wife, couldn't generate genuine interest in getting to know someone new when my existing relationship was imploding. I did not schedule a second date. As the weeks passed, our marriage changed in ways both subtle and profound. Sophia spent less time at home. When she was there, she was often texting others, smiling at inside jokes I wasn't part of. Our physical intimacy, already diminished before opening the marriage, became almost non-existent. She would come home late, shower immediately, and fall asleep on her side of the bed without reaching for me. Our weekly check-ins became increasingly superficial. When I tried to express my discomfort, Sophia would remind me that this had been a mutual decision, that I was also free to see others, that perhaps my unhappiness stemmed from not embracing the lifestyle fully. She recommended books on overcoming jealousy and possessiveness, as if my pain was a character flaw, rather than a natural response to watching my marriage disintegrate. About 2 months into our open marriage, I noticed a pattern I couldn't ignore. While Sophia had gone on initial dates with various men, one name had started appearing with increasing frequency: James, her coworker. The same James she had been working closely with before we opened our marriage. The same James whose texts had made her smile and turn her phone away from my view months earlier. The realization hit me with stunning clarity. Our open marriage hadn't been about exploration or growth or any of the progressive ideals Sophia had espoused. It had been about legitimizing a specific relationship she had already developed. I had agreed to an arrangement that was simply providing cover for what was in essence an affair she wanted to conduct with my knowledge and blessing. When I casually mentioned I'd noticed she was seeing James frequently, her response was tellingly defensive. That is what open marriages are, for right. Finding compatible partners. James and I click. We have work in common. It is convenient. I let it drop, but something compelled me to look deeper. One night when Sophia was out with him, I did something I'm not proud of. I checked her laptop, which she had left open on our desk. I told myself I was just confirming what I already suspected, seeking closure rather than hope. What I found shattered any remaining illusions. Messages between them dating back months before our open marriage discussion. Flirtatious at first, then increasingly intimate. Plans to meet outside of work for brainstorming sessions that coincided with nights she'd told me she was working late. References to feelings they both acknowledged were developing. One exchange from 2 weeks before she had first suggested opening our marriage stood out painfully. "James, I can't stop thinking about you. What are we doing here, Sophia?" "I know. I feel the same way. I'm trying to figure it out. I care about Enrique, but these feelings for you are real too." "James, I don't want to be the bad guy breaking up a marriage." "Sophia, you're not. I'm working on a solution where nobody has to be hurt." That solution had been to convince me to accept an open marriage that was merely a front for a relationship that had already betrayed our vows. I had been manipulated into sanctioning my own betrayal. I closed the laptop and sat in the dark, a strange calm, replacing the anxiety that had been my constant companion for months. The pieces finally fit together. This wasn't about my inadequacy or our relationship needing spice or modern approaches to marriage. It was about Sophia wanting someone else, but not wanting to be the villain in our story. For the first time since this began, I saw with perfect clarity what I needed to do. I had spent months trying to understand what was happening to my marriage, but nothing prepared me for the confrontation that followed my discovery. When Sophia returned home that night, I was waiting in the living room, her messages with James printed and sitting on the coffee table between us. "We need to talk," I said, my voice steadier than I'd expected. She sensed something had changed immediately, her eyes darting between my face and the papers on the table. When she realized what they were, her expression cycled through shock, anger, and finally a calculated composure. "You went through my private messages. That is a violation of trust, Enrique." The irony was so thick I almost laughed. Trust. You and James were together before we ever discussed opening our marriage. You manipulated me into agreeing to an arrangement that was just cover for an affair that was already happening. It was not like that she insisted sitting down across from me. Yes, James and I had a connection, but nothing physical happened until after our agreement. I was trying to be ethical about it. There was nothing ethical about lying to me for months. About presenting this as some mutual growth opportunity, when it was really just about legitimizing your feelings for someone else. Sophia's defense shifted to attack. "You are too traditional in your thinking. Marriage does not have to be what your parents had. People are complex. Feelings are complex. Limiting ourselves to outdated models of relationships is what causes pain." "No," I said firmly. "Dishonesty causes pain. Manipulation causes pain. What hurts is not that you developed feelings for someone else. That can happen to anyone. What hurts is that instead of being honest with me, you constructed an elaborate scenario to get what you wanted, while making me think it was my shortcoming for not embracing it enthusiastically." For hours we went in circles. Sophia alternated between defending her actions as progressive and enlightened, suggesting I was simply too possessive and conventional, and minimizing the emotional affair that had clearly preceded our agreement. By morning we had reached no resolution, except my certainty that I had been gaslit for months. In the weeks that followed, Sophia continued seeing James while insisting to me and our friends that we had a modern ethical arrangement that was working for everyone. When friends expressed concern about how withdrawn I'd become, she told them I was still adjusting to non-monogamy and needed time to work through my jealousy issues. Some believed her narrative completely. Andrea and Thomas, a couple we'd been close with for years, even took Sophia's side, explicitly suggesting I try therapy to address my insecurities. Others, like my brother Lucas and our friends Miguel and Kirsten, saw through the facade and offered quiet support. I began to doubt myself. Maybe I was the problem. Maybe my inability to embrace this lifestyle was a personal failing. I started seeing a therapist, Dr. Martinez, hoping to find a way to accept what my marriage had become. Instead, those sessions became the first step toward recognizing my own worth. "Enrique, Dr. Martinez said during our third session, have you considered that your discomfort isn't about possessiveness, but about recognizing dishonesty, about your values being violated?" Those conversations gave me the perspective I desperately needed. But the final breaking point came on an ordinary Tuesday evening about 4 months after we had opened our marriage. Sophia came home earlier than usual, practically buzzing with excitement. I was in the kitchen making dinner, trying to maintain some semblance of normalcy in our increasingly separate lives. "I need to tell you something," she said, her eyes bright in a way I hadn't seen directed at me in a very long time. I put down the knife I was using to chop vegetables already, sensing that whatever was coming would change everything. "I'm pregnant." The words hung in the air between us. For a brief, disorienting moment, I felt a surge of complex emotions, shock, confusion, and even a flash of joy conditioned by years of thinking we might someday start a family together. But as quickly as it came, the feeling evaporated, replaced by a cold realization. "It's James's, isn't it?" My voice sounded distant even to my own ears. Her surprised expression confirmed that she hadn't even considered I might think otherwise. "Of course. We've been careful. But these things happen." What struck me most wasn't the pregnancy itself, but the complete disconnect in how she viewed our situation. She seemed to genuinely expect me to be happy for her to embrace this development as part of our open marriage arrangement. "I thought you should know," she continued, seemingly oblivious to my distress. "This doesn't change anything between us, of course. Our arrangement can continue exactly as it has been." In that moment, I saw with perfect clarity what our marriage had become in her eyes: a comfortable home base, a stable foundation from which she could pursue what really excited her. I was a safety net, not a partner, and she genuinely believed I would accept this role indefinitely. "Congratulations," I managed to say, before walking out the front door. I drove aimlessly that night, the city lights blurring through tears I hadn't realized were falling. I ended up at a viewpoint overlooking the city, the same spot where we had once parked early in our relationship, talking until dawn about our dreams and hopes. The painful irony wasn't lost on me. At 2 in the morning, I called Lucas, my brother, and the one person I knew would give me unfiltered truth. "She's pregnant with his child," I said when he answered, skipping any preamble. A long pause then. "And she expects you to be okay with this." "Yes." Another pause. "What do you want, Enrique? Not what you think you should want, or what would make this easier for everyone else. What do you actually want?" No one had asked me that question in a very long time. Not Sophia, not our friends, not even myself. I had been so focused on accommodating, on being understanding, on not being the jealous, possessive husband, that I had completely lost sight of my own needs and boundaries. "I want out." I finally admitted the words, bringing an immediate sense of relief. "I can't do this anymore." "Then that's what you do," Lucas said simply. "And I'm here for whatever you need." I spent 3 days in a hotel, not responding to Sophia's increasingly frantic texts and calls. I needed the distance to think clearly, to make decisions from a place of self-respect rather than fear. By the third day, the panic that had been my constant companion for months had been replaced by a calm certainty. I set up a consultation with a divorce attorney, Patricia Wong, who listened to my story without judgment and outlined my options clearly. I began documenting the timeline of deception, securing copies of important financial documents, and making preparations for separation. I found an apartment not far from my office and paid the security deposit the same day. For the first time in months, I felt in control of my life again. Not happy. The pain was still acute, but purposeful. I was choosing my path rather than simply reacting to Sophia's. When I finally returned home, it was with a clarity and determination that must have been visible immediately. Sophia started with anger about my disappearance, then shifted to concern about my emotional state, but I remained focused. "I'm filing for divorce," I said, when she paused for breath. She stared at me in genuine shock. "Divorce? Why, I told you nothing has to change between us." "Everything has already changed, Sophia. You're having another man's child. You've been manipulating me for months. This isn't a marriage anymore. It's an arrangement that only serves your needs while asking me to sacrifice my own." "But we agreed to an open marriage," she protested, "under false pretenses. And even if that wasn't the case, I'm allowed to change my mind. I'm allowed to recognize that this isn't working for me, that it's making me miserable. You're just jealous. You need to work through that." "No," I said firmly. "I'm unhappy. There's a difference. And I don't need to keep sacrificing my happiness to prove I'm evolved or open-minded." The conversation devolved from there. Sophia cycled through every emotional response imaginable: anger, hurt, manipulation, bargaining. But for perhaps the first time since this all began, I remained unmoved. The decision had been made not in the heat of emotion but in the clarity of distance. I had chosen myself finally, and it felt like taking a full breath after months of drowning. The months that followed my decision to divorce were among the most difficult of my life, but also the most transformative. Dismantling a shared life of 8 years proved logistically complicated and emotionally exhausting. Every coffee mug, every piece of furniture, every shared memory required a decision: yours, mine, or neither. Sophia's initial shock gave way to a campaign to change my mind. She tried everything: tearful late-night calls, enlisting friends to talk sense into me, even suggesting couples therapy, something she had previously dismissed as unnecessary. When these tactics failed, her approach shifted dramatically. She began portraying herself as the victim of my traditional values and inability to adapt to modern relationships. "He knew I was seeing James. He agreed to it. Now he is punishing me for getting pregnant," became her narrative in our social circle. Some friends believed her version entirely. Andrea and Thomas, who had been experimenting with non-monogamy themselves, stopped speaking to me completely. Others recognized the manipulation for what it was, and maintained their relationships with both of us separately. A delicate balance. I appreciated even as it created awkward social dynamics. The legal process moved forward with the cold efficiency of a system that had seen this story thousands of times before, albeit usually with less complicated circumstances. Our assets were divided. The house was sold. Neither of us wanted to live there with its tainted memories. And 6 months after Sophia's pregnancy announcement, we signed the final paperwork. James moved in with Sophia before our divorce was even finalized. I learned this from Miguel, who thought I should know but wasn't sure how to tell me. Strangely, the news didn't hurt as much as I expected. It simply confirmed what I had already understood: their relationship had always been the priority, not our marriage. Building a new life from the ground up at 34 wasn't what I had planned, but it became an unexpected opportunity to rediscover myself. My new apartment, a modern one-bedroom in a downtown high-rise, became a project, a space that reflected only my preferences, my style, my needs. I painted the walls deep blue, bought furniture that prioritized comfort over aesthetic, something Sophia had always resisted, and set up a proper home office that became my sanctuary. The first holidays alone were the hardest. Thanksgiving at Lucas's place helped, surrounded by my brother's chaotic but loving family. Christmas, I spent volunteering at a local shelter, finding unexpected solace in focusing on others' needs rather than my own sense of loss. New Year's Eve, I celebrated quietly with Miguel and Kirsten, who toasted to new beginnings and reminded me that the story wasn't over, just changing direction. Dr. Martinez continued to be an invaluable guide through the process, helping me recognize patterns I had fallen into and establishing healthier boundaries for future relationships. Our sessions shifted from crisis management to deeper work, understanding why I had allowed my boundaries to be violated for so long, why I had prioritized Sophia's happiness over my own well-being, how I could ensure I didn't repeat these patterns. Work became another source of healing. I threw myself into new projects, channeling my pain into productivity. 6 months after moving out, I was promoted to senior development lead, a position that came with both higher pay and more creative control. The professional success didn't fill the emotional void entirely, but it provided a sense of forward momentum when I needed it most. Slowly, I began reconnecting with parts of myself I had set aside during my marriage. I rejoined a local hiking group I had abandoned when Sophia showed no interest. I picked up my guitar again, something I had played religiously in college, but had gathered dust in our spare bedroom for years. I took a weekend ceramics workshop on a whim and discovered a meditative quality in working with clay that helped quiet my restless mind. New friendships emerged, often from unexpected places. Jackson, a fellow developer who had recently moved to Seattle, became a regular hiking companion. Elena, the owner of the coffee shop near my new apartment, evolved from barista to friend through daily conversations that gradually deepened beyond weather and coffee preferences. These connections reminded me that life continued to offer new beginnings, even after painful endings. Dating again felt impossible for a long time, and I didn't force it. When I finally agreed to dinner with Anna, a friend of Kirsten's, who shared my love of outdoors and old movies, it was with no expectations beyond pleasant conversation. 3 hours of effortless talking later, I realized I was capable of connecting with someone new, even if I wasn't ready for anything serious yet. Go slow, Dr. Martinez advised. But don't close yourself off out of fear. Vulnerability always involves risk, but without it, we miss the deepest connections. A year after filing for divorce, I ran into Sophia at a coffee shop downtown. Her pregnancy was clearly visible now, her hand resting protectively over her rounded belly. We spotted each other at the same moment, both freezing briefly before I nodded and walked over. "How are you?" I asked, surprised by the genuine curiosity behind my question. "Managing," she said with a tight smile. "You look well, Enrique." "I am. Getting there anyway." I gestured to her belly. "When are you due?" 3 weeks. A girl. A flash of something crossed her face. Uncertainty, perhaps, or a momentary drop in the confident facade. "James and things have been complicated. He is not sure he is ready for fatherhood or commitment." I felt a complex surge of emotions, a flicker of vindication quickly replaced by unexpected compassion. Whatever she had done, I didn't wish unhappiness on her. "I'm sorry to hear that," I said, and meant it. "I hope it works out how it's supposed to." She studied me for a moment. "You really have changed." I found myself again, I corrected gently. There's a difference. As we parted ways with awkward well wishes, I realized something profound. The anger that had fueled me through the early stages of our separation had transformed into something quieter but more powerful. A deep appreciation for the lessons learned through pain. The marriage I thought would last forever had crumbled, but from its ruins, I had built something stronger. A relationship with myself based on honesty, respect, and unwavering boundaries. I had learned that love without respect is merely dependence, that true strength often comes from walking away rather than holding on, and that betrayal, while devastating, need not define your future. I still believe in love and partnership perhaps more authentically now than before. When I eventually open my heart again fully, it will be with clearer eyes and stronger boundaries. I will bring to that relationship not desperation or compromise, but wholeness, and the quiet confidence that comes from having faced loss and survived. If you have ever had to choose yourself despite pressure to accept less than you deserve, I want you to know that the pain does eventually subside, and what remains can be beautiful in its own way. The courage to walk away from toxicity is a gift you give yourself, and the healing that follows is where the real growth happens. What was your moment of clarity that made you choose your own well-being over a relationship that was hurting you? Share your story in the comments below. If this resonated with you, please hit subscribe and like this video, and share it with someone who might need to hear that choosing themselves is not selfish, but necessary. Thank you for listening, and remember, sometimes the bravest thing you can do is put yourself first.